So the topic of today is how to read Buddhist Suttas or learning to read Buddhist Suttas. So to review, and I suppose that all of you already know about this, but just so we're clear, the Buddha was a historical person who is accepted by most historians as an historical person and who lived in Nepal and India about 2,500, 2,400 years ago. There's been a little bit of discussion about the exact time when he passed away, but that is about approximately 2,400, 500 years ago. And this was in the north of India, and you can see that in the picture here. And we've been able to ascertain some of the important places in his life because of some archaeological findings which occurred all the way back into the 19th century when people started to dig for some of the old markings that had been made in some of the holy spots of Buddhism, which had disappeared from the memory of the people at that time in 19th century India. But they were able to retrieve many of the original places in the time of the Buddha through the travel records of the Chinese pilgrims who traveled to India and made a record of everything, which is quite an interesting topic to talk about some other time. So we are talking about the Tipitaka. The Tipitaka is the word that we're using here today. Tipitaka or Tripitaka in the Sanskrit is the name of all the Buddhist teachings. You can see here an example of an old collection of all the Buddhist texts in the Thai translation, which is, as you can see, it fills about an entire cupboard. Not a very big cupboard, but still, it's quite a collection. This includes a lot of things, so I'll explain that in a moment. If we're just talking about the part of that is being translated into English, and that will probably fill up about 2/3 of that cupboard. So we haven't completely translated everything yet, and we might not even be able to reach to 2 shelves or 2/3 of the cupboard. So there's still a lot of things that haven't been translated into English yet. So in what language does it exist then? Well, we'll get in that in a moment. The Buddha, he called his own teaching Dhamma Vinaya, or simply Dhamma. And Dhamma Vinaya simply means the Dhamma means like the truth or the goodness, and Vinaya means the practice of such. So it's simply the Buddha. In the time of the Buddha, there was no such word as Buddhism, but there was the word Dhamma Vinaya, which the Buddha used for his own teaching. So even today, most Buddhists in the world will use a word that is similar to Dhamma or Dharma, which refers to the Buddhist teaching. It's only in Western languages that people refer to Buddhism. If you look at the equivalent of the word Buddhism in Asian languages, is often like the teaching or the dispensation or something like that. But there is no such word in Asian languages. The Tipitaka exists in every Buddhist tradition. So there's actually many versions of the Tipitaka, but they have been recorded in different languages. So they all go back to the same oral tradition. So it's been passed on orally for many centuries before it was recorded. And what does the word Tipitaka mean? Well, it means 3 collections, or to translate it literally, 3 baskets of books of texts. And they have all been fully translated in English. There is, first of all, the discipline. The discipline is the monastic discipline, referring to the rules of the monks and nuns. And there's the discourses, the Suttanta, which refers to all the suttas or discourses of the Buddha, which of course is most interesting for lay people to read about. And then there's the more, you could call it the encyclopedia, like the more systematic definitions and details of the Buddhist teaching, which is called the Abhidhamma. And this is a little bit more theoretical, but it can be useful sometimes when you're looking for a definition or an explanation of a word, because the Buddhist discourses tend to be very concise, so you might just be confused a little bit sometimes. So what are we talking about today? We're talking mostly about the early Buddhist texts, which are most universal in nature and most interesting to read about. They are a lot have to do with self-improvement and developing your meditation as well. These early Buddhist texts, they can be found in Pali, in Sanskrit, Tibetan, and Chinese, among others. But the most comprehensive collection up until today is that of the Pali language, which is the language that is used in Thailand, and in fact is used in all countries which are known as Theravada countries, which is mostly South Asia and Southeast Asia. So that includes India, Sri Lanka, but also Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and so on. So this is the Pali collection, and it's a very comprehensive collection that is very well preserved in many languages. But they have been translated by the British Pali Text Society from the 19th century onwards already. And you can find most of the text on the website called palitextsociety.org. They actually changed their website, so you might have the original website, but that's no longer used. Palitextsociety.org is the one who actually publishes most of the text in Pali language, and of course in the translation in English. But there have been many good translations have been done recently, and recently meaning the last 20 years or something, by a monk who is depicted here. His name is Bhikkhu Bodhi. He's an American monk. He was ordained in Sri Lanka, and they have been published by the Wisdom Publications, which has their quite unique website, wisdomexperience.org, which is, but it's actually just a publishing house. So I don't know why they chose that kind of website. But they used to be Wisdom Pubs, but they changed into wisdomexperience.org. And so they are, this is very interesting because Bhikkhu Bodhi is, of course, a practicing Buddhist, a monk. So his translations are very to the point, but they're also very scholarly and very thorough. But the interesting thing is that his translations are also accepted by the Pali Text Society, and they are published by them, but only for members, because Wisdom Publications is the main publishing house. So if you want to read Buddhist texts, you have to start here. You go to the website Pali Text Society, and you can order 1 or 2 books, and then you start there. And I will talk in a moment what kind of text would be easy to start with. But you can go to both websites, but the most recent translations are on wisdomexperience.org. So there's different layers in the Theravada Buddhist tradition, and you have to take that into account. They're all part of the tradition. We can't just deny some part. So there's the early Buddhist text. In the tradition, we simply call them the Pali, which in this case doesn't refer to the language, but it refers to the earliest layer of the Buddhist tradition. The word layer is what we normally use in Thai language. So it refers to the earliest part, the earliest stratum of the Buddhist tradition, which is the earliest text. Then there are the commentaries. They have not been fully translated yet, but some of it has. They are known as the Atthakatha. These are people who came later, many centuries after the Buddha, but some of them already were were already quite soon in the period of the Buddha, or shortly after the Buddha, they were writing commentaries on the Buddhist texts. And then there's the commentaries on the commentaries, which are known as the Tika. And then there's the sub-commentaries, which is the Anutika, which are the commentaries on the commentaries on the commentaries. It can get very theoretical quite quickly. So for our purpose, if you want to know a little bit about the Buddhist teachings, you want to read some of it for your inspiration and wisdom, then you can stick to the early Buddhist texts. They are the most accessible. They are also the most to the point. And they are, of course, also the closest to what the Buddha actually talked about, because the rest is simply an explanation of what he said. Of course, there doesn't mean that it isn't useful to listen to modern insights, to listen to modern teachers like our abbot or deputy abbot in Thailand, Nompot Machayo, Nompot Tachivo, or even if you like to read a book by the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh or someone like that, it doesn't mean that those teachers are not useful. Of course, you can read books from many Buddhist teachers that have been very good teachers. But this is just to complement the Buddhist words. So it's also important to know what the Buddha actually said and to try to understand how it's all related. And so the modern opinion is insight. We call that in the Thai tradition, we call that the Atanomati. That means the later insights and opinions, but they are simply like an addition to what the Buddha said. So if you want to start reading Buddhist texts, you can start by, I would recommend to start with the Dhammapada. Dhammapada is part of the smaller discourses. They are easily to read. They are small verses, and they are often very resonating, and they're very close at home, and they are about our daily lives. But they also are very deeply spiritual, very often. Dhammapada there are many translations of the Dhammapada in English. Somebody once gave a talk, and in that talk, he talked about more than 100 translations in English. So it's a lot. I don't know if that talk is still on the internet, but it's a fact. It's a lot. The Dhammapada is protected UNESCO heritage, so it's considered a very important text, and it has had a lot of already a lot of influence on Western society as well. But the Dhammapada is easy to order and easy to find in a local bookstore if it's a bookstore that has spiritual books. The Dhammapada, I could recommend several translations, but to be honest, I have not been keeping track of modern translations. I only recommend one thing. Whatever translations you read, try to read a translation of somebody who can actually read Pali, because there are many translators who are not actually translators. They just try to use old translations and give it a modern, try to make the words more modern or something like that, or more poetic. And I think it's better if somebody can actually read the original language. So this is a good place to start, the Dhammapada. It's a collection of concise sayings. You can also, if you're ready for it, if you're up for it, if you feel you have the courage, you can start with the Tika Nikaya. These are the long discourses. They can be ordered from wisdom experience. And the long discourses are good to read, not because they're so long, but because they actually contain a lot of, it gives you really a picture of how the Buddha taught. There's a lot of discussion and talk. There's a lot of dialogue. And you will also see how the Buddha lived in the last part of his life, because that's all been recorded in there. So it's also very human to read it, because the texts are longer. They contain more details in how people interact and so on. And it also contains a lot about the fundamentals of the Buddhism. So some scholars argue that the Digha Nikaya was originally meant for people who were new to Buddhism. So there you are. There's also the medium length discourses and the connected discourses. These are discourses which are very small and they are grouped in certain themes. There's also the Ankuttara. These are discourses also very small, very short, but they are grouped according to the number of teachings in there, which is a very unique way of collecting teachings. So these are all the discourses of the Buddha. It's quite a lot of texts. Like some of these are actually more than 1,000 pages, but you can start with the Dhammapada. That is actually, most translations are about 50 to 75 pages. So its Dhammapada is quite short. So just a few things that I would like to say before you dive into the Buddhist teachings. Maybe it's also a good thing to ask ourselves, why do we want to read the Buddhist texts? Well, it's important to understand how the Buddha taught. The Buddha himself said that he had 3 manners or 3 characteristics that are typical of the way he taught. First of all, he taught things that he had known and seen by himself. So in other words, he didn't just come up with theories and that had not been tried out yet, or utopias or something. These were things that he had known and seen by himself. He also explained all his teachings. So he didn't just say, okay, I've known and seen about these things on myself. I've experienced these things myself, and that's it. You just have to believe me. No, he actually explained it like you would give reasons for something, like you would talk with somebody who's on the same playing field, who you take serious. So he did have this kind of way of explaining things. He explained the causes and conditions of things, giving everybody the opportunity to understand his teachings. And the other thing that he said about his own teaching is that they have a miraculous character, not that it makes you fly or something, although that may be a feeling that we sometimes have in our meditation, but it is something that miraculously leads to inner development and attainment. It gives you the opportunity to actually work on yourself. Our deputy abbot once said that every page in the Buddhist text, from the first to the last, can be practiced. It's all very practical, and it's meant to really work on yourself. That said, it's important to know that when you start to read the Buddhist text, you will hear things that you haven't heard before, or in other words, you read things you haven't read before. But it also is good for rereading things. You know, you don't just take a Buddhist text to a beach and then you read it for 3 hours in one end. That's not, well, I wouldn't recommend that. Maybe you like to read on the beach, but I'm just saying that it's not something you can easily just finish in one go. You have to really let it sink in. So the second thing that you gain from learning Dhamma is it actually helps you to clarify things. It's good to review things. It's not always about getting some new information. New information is number one. You hear something you haven't heard before. You read something you haven't read before. But the second one is it actually clarifies things that you thought you knew. Yeah, there's a thing called educated ignorance, which means that you heard about something but you don't really get it yet. That is also very good to overcome by reading these texts again and again. It also helps you to really overcome your doubts. It isn't just intellectual knowledge that gets more and more firm in your mind, but it also helps you to really emotionally deal with doubts in life. Is it really true that you always gain something when you do something good? Is it really true that there is such a thing as goodness in the world. You might have these doubts that are leading you to cynicism sometimes, or you might have these doubts that are about the spiritual life. Is there such a thing as a purpose in life, and so on? These texts can help you with that. They don't contain all the answers, but they do contain good ways to ask the right questions, and that can help you to the right answers. In that way, you can also immediately go to the fourth benefit of reading these texts, and that is it actually helps you to straighten out your views. It helps you to clear up this perspective that you have. It may sometimes you see things in a twisted way, you don't see things as they really are. These texts can help you with that process. And finally, if you can't get any knowledge or experience from these texts, then at least it helps you to be positive. The mind becomes placid, the mind becomes clear. You're reading about character, you're reading about a good life, you're reading about being a good person, you're reading about being a wise person. That is just very nice to do, and it's very inspiring. And connecting to that, it's always important when you read these texts that you take it with you. The Buddha said there's 3 ways to listen to the Dhamma or to read the Dhamma. First, you do it like somebody with inverted wisdom. You read these texts and then you say, I don't agree with that, I don't agree with that, I don't agree with that, and then you don't gain anything. But you can also read it in a way like you don't really think about it. You just say, oh, yeah, I agree with all of that. But you don't really process it. That it can also be inverted wisdom. Or it can be lap-like wisdom. What is lap-like wisdom? That is the word the Buddha used for somebody who just puts something on his lap, like this kid, and then stands up and just let it all fall. And the same way, when you're reading these texts, you want to take something with you of these texts. You try to find something that you can really use in your daily life, maybe a habit you want to develop, or a habit you want to overcome. And then lap-like wisdom won't occur. You can really bring it with you. You won't just let it fall when you stand up. And of course, when you do it like that, then you are practicing to read the Dhamma as somebody with wise wisdom. So this is getting a little bit more detailed, but I think it helps to understand what the Buddha's teaching is about. First of all, the Buddha compared his teaching with an ocean, but there's many reasons why he did that. First of all, the Buddhist teaching has many levels to it. And in that way, the Buddha said the ocean, it slants, it slopes and inclines gradually. It doesn't just go like this, boof. Like in Britain, you have these rocks, right, at the coast, and they just go like, whoop. But this is a gradual slope. So there's many levels to it. Some people are only interested in the meditation part. Some people are also interested in the mindfulness part. But they don't really feel much about the ethics. And then some people want to know all the Buddhist teachings. So this is up to you. You can take whatever, you can use whatever you want to use, but remember that if you are opening yourself up to all these Buddhist teachings, you gain the most. But it's a gradual process, and that's okay. Some things you can't really follow, or you don't really agree with it, but you just park it. You can come back to that later if you want. That is the gradual process. Secondly, the Buddha said the great ocean is stable and does not overflow its boundaries. That means that the Buddhist teachings also contain a lot of rules. And this is also because the Buddha wanted people to lead an ethical life, so that just like the sea doesn't cross its boundaries, then in the same way a person doesn't like, what he means by not overflow its boundaries means that the sea usually stays at about the same level. It just goes back and forth, but it doesn't, just there's not a tsunami every day or something. So there's usually some stability there. So in the same way, the Buddhist teachings allow us to lead an ethical life, help us stick to our principles. The great ocean does not associate with a corpse, but quickly carries it to the coast and washes it ashore. That means that that the Buddhist teachings, they help us also to be more careful and selective who we associate with. Now, it may sound a little bit aggressive to compare people with corpses, but the point is that when we are reading about these good and wise teachings, it also helps us to be more careful in who we associate with. And sometimes that can be a good thing, but it doesn't mean that we should be aggressive or angry or not compassionate to others, but simply be a bit cautious whom you are spending your time with the most. When the great rivers reach the great ocean, they give up their former names and designations and are simply called the great ocean. That is an interesting thing, isn't it? When all the rivers come together in an ocean, it's just an ocean. It's just the Pacific Ocean or the North Sea. That's an interesting, there's no Rhine in the North Sea. You can't find the Rhine back there. You cannot find it. There is no Sanya or whatever river you want to talk about. So the point, what the Buddha is making here is that these Buddhist teachings are very universal. There is no teaching for people who are poor or people who are rich or people who are Asian or people who are Western. These teachings have a universal nature. All the rivers come together here. Whatever streams in the world flow into the great ocean. So whatever streams in the world flow into the great ocean. And however much rain falls into it from the sky, neither a decrease nor a filling up can be seen in the great ocean. The sea doesn't just suddenly become a lot more, although maybe climate change might be a little bit different here. But in general, seas don't increase in size overnight. So that with that, the Buddha means that there's a strong consistency and strong character in these teachings, and there's always room for people to learn about these teachings and to gain from it. There's always space for you to learn about it. There is no secret teaching. There's nothing like the Buddha will teach that afterwards or some other time in secret or something. No, the Buddha always taught with an open hand. So there's whoever wants to know something, they can always come in and get to know it. The great ocean has but one taste, the taste of salt. That means that the Buddhist teaching has only one taste, the taste of awakening, of enlightenment. All the Buddhist teachings are about overcoming greed, overcoming hatred and anger, overcoming delusions. So whenever the practicing Buddhism gives you more anger, more greed, more delusion, you're doing something wrong. The great ocean contains many precious substances. There are many good teachings in the Buddhist. There are many precious teachings. I come across new wisdom so often, even though I've been reading the Buddhist texts for over 20 years now. So these there's so many treasures in here. And then the great ocean is the abode of great beings. There are great masters. There are really great masters out there, great teachers in many Buddhist traditions. And when you see these people, you believe this is a teaching that is alive. You meet these people and it really strikes you. I've had the opportunity to talk and meet with our abbot and deputy abbot in Thailand, Lompota Machayo, Lompota Tachivo. I was not in time to meet Kunyai. When I came to the temple, Kunyai didn't come in didn't come into public that much anymore. She wasn't seen in public that much anymore. She was already quite old then. But I would like in a future lifetime maybe meet Kunyai and Lompo, because these are all very great people. And I just reading their teachings, you gain so much. And just meeting them in person, you gain also a lot of inspiration. You can see that this is not just a theory. You can see these people and learn from them. So this is all about the Eightfold Path, as you are familiar in the Buddhist teachings, and we'll talk more about that some other time. But just to make sure that you remember that all of this is not so much about becoming a Buddhist, although that could be part of it if you want to, but it's all about improving your ethics, improving your mind, and improving your perspective and wisdom with regard to life. So that is really what reading the Buddhist text is about. You can also find many levels of teachings, but I already mentioned that. So just a few tips. When you read the Buddhist text, you may come across these words. Thus have I heard. Every Buddhist text starts with these words. This is the beginning of nearly all Buddhist discourses. Not everyone, every text, but almost every text. These are traditionally attributed, these words, to the Venerable Ananda, who was the attendant of the Buddha. And the Venerable Ananda, he was the living memory of the Buddha. He was always with him, and he would always try to remember everything the Buddha said. So these words are traditionally attributed to him. Thus have I heard. Some scholars say that they have a more general sense, but regardless, it refers to the oral tradition, and it means that those who recorded these teachings, they make the claim that they actually heard these teachings from the Buddha himself. The Buddha is not always called the Buddha in the Buddhist text. Actually, most of the time, the texts don't call him the Buddha, but they refer to him as the Blessed One, or the Exalted One, which is in the Pali language, Bhagavat. And this is important to know. So when you see the word the Blessed One or the Exalted One, then you know what they are talking about. Sometimes it's also just translated as the Lord, which I think is a bit confusing because this is also used in Christianity. But anyway, that may be something you find in some translations. And also the word, just the teacher. Sometimes you just see the word the teacher, sasada. Then you've come across that word householder. That means a layperson. It means somebody with a house. Monks have only a shared space. We don't really have a house of our own. So that's why they use that word for lay people, householder. And then there is a noble disciple. That simply means a wise person, often a person close to enlightenment. It does not mean somebody who is from noble descent, though that is an important change in meaning. And the translation seems a little confusing, but you have to remember that the Buddha also played on these words. So the word that he used was originally referred to nobility, but then he changed the meaning. So that's why they translate it in that way. First, one more thing, the last thing I'm telling you, when you read the Buddhist text, there will be a lot of repetition. This comes down to the basic motto, which you may have heard of, which is taught to many people who practice public speaking. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. So when the Buddhist teachings, they talk, for example, about the Buddhist teachings talk about 5 things that help you in your meditation, then the Buddha will first mention that there are 5 things, then he will explain what these 5 things are, and at the end he will say, these are the 5 things. So this is how these Buddhist teachings are organized. One more thing that I would like to say at the end is that sometimes it seems that there are many lists in Buddhism. Maybe that's a bit confusing. Why there are so many lists, and it seems a bit dry for some people. But this is the nature of Buddhism. Some scholar of religion said some scholar of religion said that the Hindus, they have their gods, and the Buddhists, they have their lists. And that means that there's many Buddhist teachings that are organized into lists. It helps to remember. It makes it easy to remember these teachings. And it also is a way to pass on the oral tradition. So we have to remember that the Buddhist teachings originally were passed on orally through word to mouth, word to person to person. So this is very important. So that's why what makes you understand why there's so many lists in Buddhism. But we have to go look beyond those lists and look beyond the words. We have to remember one more tip that I'd like to give you if you're reading these texts. Remember that in ancient times, people were a little bit direct, more so than in the present day. So sometimes these teachings may seem a little bit direct or a little bit just seem to be a little bit, wow, that's very much to the point. So that is because in the ancient times, people were just a little bit direct sometimes. So that's something you might have to get used to if you're reading these texts. So maybe you don't need to read for many hours if you want to read these texts, but just read a little bit every day or read a little bit every week, and it will help to enrich your life. I recommend this to anybody. And I know that there are some people who say, well, you can just listen to a Buddhist monk and that's okay. And then you already know the Buddhist teachings and you can practice it. And that's true. But if you have something to fall back to, sometimes these Buddhist teachings, they can give you a foundation. And sometimes Buddhist monks, we are already so familiar with these teachings that we sometimes we forget to say things, or we just go to the how to, and we forget the why and the what. And sometimes that's good to help you to find this why and find this what. So that is a few tips and a few parts, a little bit of wisdom that I'd like to share with you today. Again, I'll just pop up the slide with the website, and I'm not showing you that for the commercial reasons, of course, but I'm just showing you that because these are the only publishers that publish these. But I'm sure that you can also find these books on Amazon or any other online store with a little bit of size to it. But these are the original publishers. So that is PaliTextSociety.org and then WisdomExperience.org. And both of them are very good. But the latter, Wisdom Experience, actually also publishes the more recent translations. So you can just look for Pali on this website, and then you will find the translations by Bhikkhu Bodhi. But here in the Pali Text Society, you can also find many other texts that have not been translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi, but by other scholars or by Burmese monks. So there's a lot to learn, and I'm sure you can gain something there. I hope you gain something from this talk. And if you have any questions, you can ask them now.